open profiles or just on profiles in general. Pictures, photos. Anymore it used to be that a lot of the social media platforms, you had a lot of dialogue or you had a lot of content. For the most part now, everybody shows it through pictures or photos. I'm going to upload this photo that I took at the baseball game so all my friends can see I'm here. And everybody does that now through visual context rather than verbal context. And so that's something that is very important to understand as well. You can get education, usernames, phone numbers, hometown information. And a lot of this information just is put out. It's put out when they create that profile. So, wealth of information. Now I'm going to kind of just go through a couple case scenarios with you, just to show you how law enforcement has been able to use successfully social media for certain investigations. And there's a lot of different examples out there. The ones that I'm showing here today are going more to, and showing more of things that have touched my agency or touched the state of West Virginia as we've kind of went through this. But we've got Michael Tarp here, who was wanted in 4 states, started in Connecticut, started to work his way down. Grand larceny, robbery, sexual assault, wanted for all those different charges. And as he was kind of committing this spree and moving down and moving through the southern part of the United States, and moving south with it, he had an open Twitter profile. All right, so an open Twitter profile, open Facebook account, and essentially he was posting information on his Twitter feed, on his Facebook account, and which would be be very valuable to look at and see this information and monitor the activity as to where is he at now and maybe what's going on here. And from a tactical standpoint, this is what law enforcement also has to think about here. We could very easily have said, you know what? We need to see if we can turn out and disable that Facebook account or disable that Twitter account. But from a tactical standpoint, you also have to think, is it providing some good information for us on this investigation? So do I want to keep it going? And see what can come out on it. So that's a decision that you have to kind of think about and make. And that really depends on the situation and the investigation and things like that. But in this case, they left it open. And after a while, some of the tweets that came out were taunting law enforcement and things like that, and probably made a lot of law enforcement officials, kind of mad. But he was eventually caught. Caught in Council Bluff, Iowa, actually. But not before he put out a lot of information out there. Now, just by when the investigation started and his Twitter account was identified, so we go to his Twitter profile. And this is what you have to think of from an investigative standpoint. What other information can I find? And just by going to his open profile, you're able to look at, okay, Big Mike, Michael Bodai. That's an alias he actually had, and then went by. So we've got a little bit of information there. Also identifies his Facebook page. So, follow me on Facebook as well. So it gives us another angle to kind of look at, to be able to, and a source to use, to be able to see if there's any valuable information that we can glean from that as well, just by looking at this one profile. Also, was Kent State football player, Kent State, Ohio. We can verify that information. That should be fairly easy to verify. It may provide benefit within the investigation. Some of the different tweets, and these are all public tweets that were utilized, that you can kind of look at. And the one I have highlighted here, and you can kind of read some of these, and they're kind of funny, but Michael, who was involved in this case, Mike, they met. Now, from a law enforcement standpoint, what do you kind of think about here? Well, that might be a good person we want to go talk to or go interview. All right, and learn a little bit more about where they were at last night, what they were doing. So again, it kind of gives you another lead to follow and look at when you're dealing with this type of investigation. You're using this type of information. And again, intelligence gathering kind of goes in. Long story short, was arrested in Council Bluffs, Iowa, trying to steal gas from his own car. All right, but following his tweets, his tweets, and following some information that he posted on public forums, it was very easy to kind of follow the pattern and help determine where he was and ultimately make the arrest. So that's just one example. Another example that I'll mention here, and everybody, this should be fairly familiar, everybody's still fresh in everybody's mind. James Holmes, active shooter, Aurora, Colorado, 12 killed, 70 wounded. Everybody remembers this. Entered an insanity plea after the shooting. All right, it's in court now. Actually, what's going on with that is information found on one of the social media platforms is being looked at by the courts to see if it's going to be actually admitted. And I'm going to kind of go to the next slide and show you what that was. Now, a lot of folks don't think about the online dating sites that are out there that will keep, and they have a profile just like the Facebook page does. Okay? And they ask us a lot of the same information. They ask for photos. Now, I'll talk about this first and I'll go back. Will you visit me in prison? This was posted shortly before that shooting occurred. Okay? So, he's pleading insanity. Do you think this might help the prosecution? Absolutely. And the prosecution is hoping to get this admitted into court so they can use that. So, did he know what he was doing? A lot of folks speculated that he wanted law enforcement to go in when they went in to kill him. This, not telling me that. So, things like that, from a law enforcement standpoint, from an intelligence gathering standpoint, that can be very beneficial to the prosecution. Huge. Also, on this site, just by this one particular case, when that news story broke, everybody saw this photo. The photo at the bottom. It was, I think, taken from his, when he was in college there. But it really doesn't look like anything that he currently looked like. And so, now, it goes back to saying, well, if law enforcement would have been on this Twitter feed or hashtag, or if they would have been here, we'd have got that information. This is after the fact, I understand that. But this is something that you have to think about as to where you can collect and gather some of this intel and information that will help you in these cases. And this is just one area or one avenue that provided some benefit. Public awareness, kind of moving on to the public awareness aspect. Keeping the public informed about their community can have great benefit to law enforcement agencies, absolutely. And I spoke to this earlier. Pushing information out to the public, gathering information, from your community is extremely important and very valuable. The neighborhood watch programs, a lot of the neighborhood watch programs have now went to Facebook groups, which is great. This is a way for folks to be able to communicate on a real-time basis and be able to push information out in real time. Public education, putting crime stats and community bulletins out there for your public to be able to see. This is great. This is you're hitting a whole new audience when you're pushing that information out. Road closures, construction. Your community may find that very valuable. That your department keeps them up on that and pushes that information out to them. Now, I've already kind of mentioned this, the different email, text message alerts, Facebook groups, community blogs that law enforcement either can collect information from or disseminate information to. Boston, PD. Great, I don't know if we have anybody from Boston PD here, but utilize social media, a number of different platforms. And the hunt is over, the search is done, the terror is over. They sent out that tweet. That was the first way they notified the public of when they caught the individual who went the bombings that committed the bombing there in Boston. They sent it out via tweet. That was the first time. Okay, that was it was first captured through the tweet. So I just wanted to kind of provide that example as well to show that. Crowdsourcing, tips and leads. This is becoming bigger and bigger. And this is becoming something that we can really try to involve our community with on a regular basis. And, as far as getting information to the public and then having them actually come back and say, you know what? Hey, I know a little bit about this. Let me share this with you. Got any WV fans in here? Maybe? Hey, am I the only one? Really? That's all right. We took one on the chin yesterday with Texas Tech as well. Not having a great season this year. But I wanted to kind of provide some relevance as to what I'm talking about. And, Morgantown, that's about 20 minutes down the road from where our office is at. And so we work with Morgantown PD on a regular basis on different things and projects that they have. This is just a small example, but it kind of drives the point home. So you've got your WVU post-game celebrations and how social media is utilized. Well, we have a problem in Morgantown that after we win games, we like to flip cars over and burn couches. That's just the way it is. And so this has become very problematic for Morgantown PD, for WVU police, to, how do we get a handle on this? How can we prevent this from happening? And so here are some different photos that take place of, that are pushed out there and show the actual events that are taking place. And law enforcement has now, Morgantown PD has now figured out the benefit of, wow, you know what? If we got surveillance video from this business who saw these cars being tipped over, or we've got individuals from the university who are sending us photos because they're afraid their house is going to catch on fire because these guys are out here burning these couches. We can post that back out and see if we can get some of these university students or somebody to identify some of these folks so we can go talk to them or make an arrest, or at least question as to what they're doing. All right. And so they've got a huge response, and it's been very, very well received in getting that information out to the public and getting the intake back, and that's crowdsourcing. You're using the public to be able to help you solve some of the investigations that you have. And it's provided a lot of great information and a lot of good feedback and a lot of arrests based on that. So just a couple of examples there. As Nancy said, you're really going to have to know your own community and figure out how you're going to have to be creative in how you're going to use social media. What's going to best benefit your community? How are you going to use it? This was a problem in Morgantown. This was a problem in Morgantown. They try to figure out a way to resolve it. This may not be the same thing in your area, but there may be other things similar that you can kind of think of that, okay, man, maybe we can spin it and use it for this as well. Also within crowdsourcing, again, going back to kind of the Boston Bombers, or the Boston bombing marathon that happened and trying to identify some of the different suspects that were there. There was surveillance footage, video all through downtown Boston. I mean, every building has, for security purposes, has a camera on their building. There's photos that that are taken by the public who may have been at the event, and all that information is very valuable, especially when something like that happens. It can help law enforcement establish a timeline. If that information is pushed out and law enforcement receives it, it can help them identify different hats that were worn that may have been put out there, and the public can be able to comment on and say, no, I think it may have been this, may have been that. So, using that information and creating a timeline to help and assist law enforcement with that investigation is very, very important. Seattle Police Department, this is what I thought was interesting. When we were doing some research on some of the things that we were doing at our work and utilizing, anybody from Seattle? Seattle Police Department, they put together a Twitter account that dealt with auto theft. And, so very